Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. Let's quickly recap what we were just talking about. What do we remember from the end of last time?
One consul. Was it the war of
The Aequi? Yeah, so
I
we
don't
had
like wars.
war with Volsci and Aequi. Those are pretty much going to be almost an annual thing now, where they, during the military season, come and invade Rome's territory, try to get what they can. Rome has to send out 2 consuls to deal with them. The Sabines will jump in every now and then.
Remember a lot of internal conflict with the plebs.
Yeah, so we're going through a period of Roman history known as the conflict of the orders, the fight between the plebs and the patricians, for the plebs basically trying to be on equal terms with the patricians, which in the long run is where it's headed. And so our last time, we had our 2 consuls. First, the plebs, they tried, what is the law that they were just trying to get through? The agrarian law. So they were trying to get the agrarian law through, which basically would designate a bunch of Rome's public land to be handed privately over to the plebs. The reason the Romans are opposed to that is because, the reason the patricians are opposed to that is because they currently occupy the land, even though they don't technically own it, and so they have infrastructure built out on there. Anyways, the plebs, they put a pin in the agrarian law for a second, and they instead went to the Lex Publilia. The Lex Publilia, which was the law suggested by Publilius, that the tribunes basically be elected by the centuriata, or by the comitia, the assembly by tribe rather than by century. So remember, Publius here, he was basically elected by the patricians to be tribune. They basically pushed all the wealthy plebs to elect this guy. And they did that in an effort to kind of simmer things down. And it worked.
He refused to enlist or something?
Yeah, he refused to enlist. That led to a big problem. They were wondering, how should we punish this guy? And the older senator suggested, let's make sure that he's a tribune of the plebs next year. In other words, let's act graciously towards him, and when he gets in that position, he'll likely act graciously towards us, and we can calm things down. And it worked. The time that he was tribune of the plebs, he didn't push the agrarian law, but instead, he basically said the way that I became tribune shouldn't be a thing. It shouldn't be up to the patricians who the tribunes are. We need to make it up to the plebs who the tribune of the plebs are. And so they were able to push forward that law, the law that made the election of tribunes now by tribe rather than by century. Now, every tribe has an equal say in who the tribune is, rather than the wealthiest pretty much determining it. Remember, your equites and your first-class citizens pretty much decide how the vote goes. So your top 1% of wealth holders, when it's done by century, pretty much decide who wins the election. This now makes it pretty evenly distributed. Everyone kind of has an equal say now in who the tribune of the plebs is going to be. So that was a big one that they pushed forward. Now we remember Appius Claudius. Hey, they did come.
Yeah, of course I came.
Of course. Only took a week and 6 minutes. All right. Anyways, so Appius Claudius, remember, the patricians put him as consul simply to make sure this law would not pass. And so he did his best to make sure the law would not pass. And then the Senate decided, no, let's pass the law and calm things down in his consulship, which he hated. He felt like it was them being cowards. And during his consulship, he was then also given command of an army after he had been the one fighting this law. And so the plebs hate him. And we remember his absolutely disastrous campaign against the Volsci. It was a complete failure, complete embarrassment. His army got completely routed. Ultimately, he had to end up decimating his army, killing 1 in 10 of every one of them. Titus Quintus, the other consul at the time, he was the more moderate one, the one saying, hey, let's hear the plebs out. And so he was, when he fought the other army, remember, pretty much every year, one army has to go deal with the Volsci, one has to go deal with the Aequi. His army has an absolutely great time of it. His army completely supports him. His army has such high morale that the Aequi don't even dare come out of the field and fight him. And so his guys just go through, running through the Aequian land, gathering up a bunch of plunder, and come back home, all the wealthier for it, not losing a single soldier. They have a great time of it. And so now, military season's over. Both the consuls are coming back to Rome, and we're going to get into Appius Claudius's trial. And that's where we were ending last time. Any catch-up questions, clarifications we need to make really quick before we move forward? All right, so let's get into Appius Claudius's trial. Now, you might think he's probably being put on trial for the way that he treated his army out on campaign, right? Wrong. There's nothing illegal about what he did there. It just made the people hate him. But technically, when a consul is outside the city of Rome, they have power over life and death out there. Remember, you have the fasces signifying your power. When a consul steps outside the pomerium, they add an axe to their fasces, signifying that they now have that power over their army. And so there was technically nothing wrong that he did there, but what he did there is he made the people absolutely despise him, even more, the plebs did. And so when he gets back to Rome, and once his consulship is over, a consul can't be put on trial while they're a consul, so once his consulship is over, now the tribunes come after him. And what they come after him for is basically being too aggressive with the people when trying to stop them from passing the law, back when he was trying to pass the law. Now, understand, the tribunes don't just get to take the law in front of the people and say, hey, let's vote on this law to change things. What the tribunes were doing was kind of illegal, and so the only thing the consuls really could do is physically stop them from voting. And so them putting him on trial here, once again from a patrician perspective, this is pretty fishy. We already agreed to let the law go through, you got what you wanted, and now the guy who was doing pretty much exactly what we asked him to, you're now going to go after him on trial? And they knew it was really because they didn't like Appius Claudius. It was really, they were trying to punish him. It wasn't really about doing anything illegal. So they decided they're going to put him on trial. Now, what are they putting him on trial for? They are putting him on trial for abusing his powers as consuls, using lictors to put down support for the Lex Plubilia, really using lictors to physically remove the crowd. Physical violence against them. That's what they're putting him on trial for. Now, Appius Claudius, much like his father, refuses to even recognize the trial as legitimate. He says, you guys have no power over me. The other senators say, if you just go, kind of just apologize to him, admit you were wrong, ask for forgiveness, they'll give you a slap on the wrist and we can go our merry way. Let's not make a big deal out of this. Let's not let it blow out of proportion. Appius Claudius, he refuses. He says, no, not going to ask for any forgiveness at all. But fine, I'll go to my trial. They talk him into at least showing up for his trial. And when he goes up and he shows up to his trial, he basically gets up and he gets after the tribunes and the people. He says, what you guys were doing was illegal. You basically forced me to behave the way I was behaving. The way Livy says it is he talked not like a defender, but an accuser in going after the people. And the tribunes and the people are so kind of taken back by this that they want to postpone the trial. You got to thinking, was he in the right? Was there something okay that he did? And so they decide to actually postpone the trial and come back to it later. Now, probably lucky for Rome, Appius Claudius happens to fall ill. And he gets sick. And so, they don't want to put him on trial while he's ill, and so they keep postponing the trial and keep postponing the trial. And this illness ends up taking his life. So they never actually go through the trial, sentencing him to death or exile for basically misbehaving as a consul, which would have set a terrible precedent in the mind of the patricians. Like, this isn't something that should be happening. Now, the tribunes are so petty that they tried to even block his funeral oration, the speech that he gave at the funeral. And even when the tribunes tried to do that, even the people, the plebs, they started booing down the tribune, saying, no, let him speak, let the person speak about his life. Because, understand, Appius Claudius, from the perspective of the Senate, he was a great man from a high family. And so that was an absolutely dishonorable thing to not even let them talk about, because he had done many great things for Rome. And he had won battles prior to this and been a great soldier and all that. And so even the plebs recognized tribunes, that's too far, let him speak. Go ahead.
Was part of the reason the plebs wanted to put him on trial because he decimated the army?
It could have been part of the reason that they hated him for sure.
But was it within his own right to do so?
But
But
within his
that's a new level of hate, right?
Okay.
I mean, when 1/10 of the army is killed by decimation, how many of your plebs, if you're a pleb, how many of those people did you know? probably a good portion of them that are now dead. So it's pretty much accepted that he was put on trial not actually because he did anything that warranted the trial legally, but simply because people despised him that much and just wanted to put him to death. But so ends up as a funeral. The plebs seem to be a lot more forgiving of him there in the end and recognize, okay, yeah, he was actually a fine man. We just hated him.
He just killed a whole bunch of our people.
He killed a whole bunch of our people, but not illegally.
He did draw their swords, so he was.
Yeah, the army kind of had it coming.
He was.
Yeah, and also he wasn't like awful to them while they were marching. It's just
No.
that-
He was pretty good to them while they were marching. They just hated him for the law.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to win any great victories for someone who was opposing the law that they were supporting that much. Okay, so next we're going to talk about some wars with the Volsci, 2 back-to-back wars. So one in 469, one 468. Remember, military season, typically what happens, consuls go out, fight the armies, come back during the campaigning season, and that's kind of an annual thing. Now, while we talked about these wars with the Volscis, understand that each year there's also another consul who goes and he's fighting the Aequi and the Sabines, and kind of nothing's happening there. So we're going to just focus on the consul who goes and actually fights the Volsci down here. Good? Alright, so now the Volsci were the ones that Appius Claudius and his army were sent against. How did their army fare against the Volsci? Not well. The Volsci pretty much humiliated them. And so when the next army comes to fight the Volsci, they're feeling pretty emboldened. They feel like they can easily take this. So the Volsci, they're up, they're raiding up in the Roman territory. One of the consuls, he has to come down, he has to fight the Volsci. The Volsci, through their overconfidence pretty much, end up losing the battle, but it's not a decisive victory. Meaning, the majority of the army still got away from the fight. So they go, they fight, the Romans technically win, and the Volscis, they retreat back to Antium here, which is like one of the Volsci's major cities. That city is a big deal for the Volsci. I think that for a portion of time it was considered their capital city. So the army goes up, lose an indecisive defeat, and then retreat back to Volsci, or retreat back to Antium. Antium is a well-defended city, has good walls. There's not a chance that the Roman army is going to be able to take it, especially because so much of the army got away it is now inside the city. And so what they do is there's some coastal town somewhere over here, and they do the next best thing. They go, they raid, and they plunder the coastal town there, and get as much loot as they can before calling it an end to the campaigning season and heading back home. So that was the first war. Nothing decisive. Good so far? Now next year, Titus Quintus, remember, he was consul, skips a year, now he's consul again. So there was a year gap there, which is typical for the consuls. The tribunes are the ones always breaking this rule where they keep re-electing the same tribunes. The consuls are pretty much honoring the rules here. So next year, he is elected as a consul, and he is the consul assigned to deal with the Volsci. The other consul decides to deal with the Aequi or the Sabines, whichever ones are invading. And so he leads his army against the Volsci, and this time he's kind of outnumbered a little bit. So there's his army, and the Volsci army outnumbers him a little bit. And the problem that he has is the Volsci are beating him on both wings. So the Volsci are winning on the right wing, and they're winning on the left wing. And so he kind of panics, and so he runs to one wing, and he tells him, hey, hold out, the other wing just won, and they're coming around. So just hold out a bit longer, the other wing's coming. And after he tells that to this wing, he runs to this wing and tells him the exact same story.
Works.
And so both wings just refuse to give ground, and the Volsci end up not being able to continue the push against them and end up giving up the battle. They lose an indecisive victory, or an indecisive defeat. The Volsci do, so the Romans win that battle. But they were on the verge of losing it. It was almost a disaster for them. Both wings were giving away. So he's able to trick his soldiers into hanging on there and win an indecisive victory. Now, when the Volsci, after they win that battle, they retreat to their camp. So now they're inside their camp, and the Romans, they're inside their camp, wherever it is. Their camps are separated by a few miles. The Volsci tried launching just a quick raid on the Romans in the night, and as the Romans realized it was happening, woke up, dealt with the raid, and the Volsci run back. What the Romans did is they only sent a few cavalry back and had that cavalry throughout the whole night kind of just running around the camp, blowing trumpets, pretending like they're giving all these military signals. While he told the rest of the camp, go to sleep, get good night's rest. So the Volsci are up all night waiting for this counterattack that just drove back these troops. And they keep hearing all these signals in the night, hearing the horns going off, don't see anything. They didn't have a very good night. So they don't get any rest. So the next day, the Roman army lines up completely well rested, ready to fight. The Volsci say, yeah, we're not doing that. And they do a controlled retreat up to some hills. And so they just move their army up onto some hills, thinking the Romans won't attack us if we're up on the hills, because that would be a bad defensive plan. It's a good defensive, good for their defense, whatever. The Roman soldiers, the consul doesn't want to continue and attack them uphill because he was able to get a nice controlled retreat. It's not like they're routing. They'd be able to easily turn and fight. The consul, Quintus, he does not want to attack uphill against these guys. But his soldiers, they love what's happening so much and love the fact that those guys were up all night and they got a good night's rest. They're eager to fight. And they say, let us fight, let us fight. And he says, no, they have the upper ground. This is a bad idea. And they say, well, let us do it. We promise we're going to win, essentially. And since his soldiers are so determined, he lets them go and fight uphill. Now, to fight uphill, the first thing they basically have to do is drop their spears so that they can run up the hill faster. And so, the Volsci are able to turn around and pretty much kill them pretty easily as they're coming up the hill. Initially, they start routing. The Romans start routing back down the hill, and the consul yells at him, I told you that this was going to happen. You promised me that we'd see victory, so get your butt back up there, essentially. Which they do, and since they just don't give up, they wear down the Volsci and end up attacking them off the hill. Now coming down the other side of the hill, that's when they actually end up suffering some pretty significant defeats. The Volsci. So now the Volsci retreating down the hill, that's when they suffer their biggest losses. And they had to leave their camp there. And so now the Romans have access to their camp, which is a good amount of plunder. And they killed a significant portion of the Volsci army as they were retreating. So this was a decisive victory. And so when they retreat back to their city of Antium, which is a well-defended city. But because of the sparse amount of troops coming back to the city and the fact that they had just lost back-to-back defeats, they don't want to hold out against the Romans. And they just surrender the town to the Romans. And so Rome now has Antium. Huge victory. Big deal. Big city. Any questions with that one? That war. So that's why that one's significant. The other war is not so significant because it's just an exchange of goods or whatever.
How long did the second battle last?
We don't have that kind of detail for any of these things.
Well, I'm just wondering why they didn't just call in reinforcements or something from one of the other towns.
They have their whole army out there. Even when we sat there by the town, we're talking about miles away, and how do you actually send a signal? You can't text your buddies and say, hey, we're going to lose if you don't come.
It's not like the movies where the allies come last second to save the day.
Yeah, they didn't light the torches. Send for Rohan. Okay, so they went, they had their big victory, they got Antium, massive accomplishment, and they go back to Rome. Rome is feeling pretty good about itself, good year for the consuls. Internal conflict still going about the agrarian law in between all these scenes, with the tribunes trying to block the levy, the consuls eventually levying the army anyways, going and fighting the army. So there's been internal chaos the entire time that those wars are going on. So I don't think Rome's calmed down. And so now comes the next year. Quinctius Fabius. You remember that one Fabian left behind?
Yeah.
He's now old enough, and now he's a consul. So Fabians are going to become consuls again. Woohoo. The family recovered somewhat.
Wow. Down to one, and then they rebuilt.
Well,
They had 306.
the one that this is the one that they left behind.
Exactly.
Killed
Oh,
Right.
that is the one.
This is the one. The chosen one. All right, so there he is, and he made it to consulship 467 BC. Now, he knows what everyone's going to be fighting about. They're going to be fighting about the same thing we were fighting about last year. And so he wants to jump on this agrarian law thing before it gets out of hand and leads to turmoil in the city for another year. And so what he suggests is, look, we just got Antium. It's right next to the coast, so it's good for trading purposes. So if you're a farmer growing crops there, you can easily trade your goods as you need. And on top of that, this is land so far away from Rome that none of you senators occupy it. We now got lands that have never been occupied by any of you. You can't pretend that you have any ownership to this. Got these fresh lands here. What we should do is we should send a colony there of all the Roman plebs who want land and address the agrarian law that way. Make sense? So that is his big idea, and he presents the legislation, and the legislation goes through. They're going to colonize Antium with their own personnel, send a bunch of their own people up there to get all the land that they want. And so he has the commission appointed, gets the people together who are supposed to gather the names, and almost no plebs put forward their names. They almost all refuse this offer. They don't want the land over by Antium. They want the land by Rome. They don't want to up and move their whole life to get their land. So they almost completely refuse. Hardly any of them decide to go with it. Once the commission is appointed and the law passes, it's kind of just like the flow of government. You've got to send the colony now. The law's been passed. And so to get people signed up in this commission, they eventually end up having to use a bunch of Volsci to do it. So they end up sending a bunch of Volsci up there to Antium to help colonize Antium, rather than Roman soldiers. Or Roman people.
Volsci their enemy?
The Volsci, so Volsci are both almost an ethnicity, the groups of the people, as well as who they keep fighting. So people of, when I say Volsci, I mean people of Volsci origin who are under Roman control. They're largely the ones who say, yeah, I'd like that land. That's pretty much where they're from. And so they're the ones who end up taking it all. And so we got this situation now where the city that was once the capital of the Volsci is now largely occupied, even under Romans, still by Volsci. And so it's basically primed to revolt in the future. Okay. Now, also under his consulship, the armies, you still have to go fight the Volsci, you still have to go fight the Aequi. So the Aequi, they come, they attack, he leads, fight against them, he beats them in the field, they lose. And they lose, embarrassingly enough, that they quickly decide to sue for peace and decide that they want to establish a peace treaty between Rome and themselves. They're getting tired of doing this, fighting every year. So let's get a treaty so that we're not fighting Rome every year. And so under Quintus Fabius, that treaty is agreed to. So they got a treaty. The next year, no war with the Aequi. Hey, that's a nice break. The year after that, 2 years later, when Quintus Fabius happens to be consul again, they decide to break the treaty and to attack. And so the Romans, once again, have to send a bunch of soldiers up there to go fight it. This time, Rome sends, if I remember right, both consular armies to go fight them. So there's 2 Roman armies coming out and fighting the Volscis in this one big pitched battle. So Volsci, they got their camp, whatever. They have their army. The Romans now, 2 consular armies are now coming out, and so
Isn't it the Aequi guys? Not
starting fighting the Aequi, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, the Aequians, not the Volsci. Okay, oops, Aequians, not the Volsci. Okay, so they go there, they rush. So the Aequians, they were basically, the way that they broke the treaty, it's not like they said, hey Rome, we break the treaty. It was that they started plundering land, in particularly around the city of Tusculum, whatever it is. Tusculum, I think. Anyway, so they start raiding these lands. Rome gets word that they're raiding these lands, and so the 2 consular armies have to book it down to go find the army and get ready to fight it. Go ahead.
So they broke the treaty because, aren't the Latins just Roman allies?
Yes, so right now you have the Romans together with the Latins and the Hernici.
Right.
Those 2 are Roman allies, and so the whole time, every time I say that the Aequians attack the Romans, it's typically that they're actually attacking the Latins. And a lot of the times when I say the Volsci attack the Romans, a lot of the times they're actually attacking the Hernici. So a lot of times it's that they're attacking Roman allies rather than Rome itself.
So Rome defends the allies.
Yes, the allies, the Latins and the Hernici, are not allowed to arm themselves They can only arm themselves when Rome requests them to, and when they do, they send soldiers to come under a Roman general's command. So they can't command their own troops in battle. They can provide troops to the Romans to fight battles, and so Rome's responsible for their defenses.
They're basically Roman.
It's kind of. They're not citizens.
Isn't that how we kind of treated Japan for a long time?
How we treated Japan, and how we treat Germany, and how we treat South Korea, and how we treat... Yeah, America has similar treaties with a lot of allies across the world, where we're basically responsible for their defense, and in exchange, they don't get to have an army. I guess the difference here is the Latins and the Granici are expected to send troops to Rome. So Rome uses your own people to defend you, but they have access to Roman troops as well. So yeah, Rome is very much responsible for their allies' defense. That's a good point.
I was trying to understand.
Nope, we're good. So the Aequi, they're out there raiding Latin land, I think around the city of Tusculum. The Romans, they book it there as fast as they can. They arrive basically at the end of the day with their armies lined up. And the Aequi start taunting the Romans, saying, this isn't making war, this is just making a show of war. You're lining up pretending that you're going to fight us. But there isn't enough time in the day for this battle to actually occur. So, be men and actually be here on the battlefield first thing in the morning, and don't show up at the end of the day like this. That's kind of ridiculous. That's the way that they taunt the Romans. The Romans don't like that taunt. They decide not to fight. They go, they sleep in their individual camps, and the next day Rome's out there at sunrise, waiting for the Aequi to slowly come out of their camp, and then they finally have the battle. When they have the battle, the Romans end up winning the battle, indecisive victory, and the Aequi run back into their camp. Now, a bunch of the Aequian soldiers get after their general, and they say, why are we fighting the Romans like this? The Romans will always beat us in a pitched battle. That's what they're built to do. What we're built to do is to raid and fight in small groups. So let's stop having these pitched battles against our armies. Let's instead go out, raid the Roman land, force them to fight us in small groups. We'll deal with them that way, and we'll come back with the plunder we get. And so the Aequian general, he says, well, that sounds fine to me. We're not going to win a pitched battle, so go ahead. So he sends out a bunch of his troops out of the camp, scattering around Roman lands, basically just plundering. And he just keeps enough of a garrison here to basically hold the camp in case they need to hold the camp. Now, Rome's a little bit shocked by this. You just beat the army, and now they're running out of their camp as though they were victorious, plundering your land. They're not really sure what to make of it. So they see the armies go. One of the groups of men gets so far into Roman territory that farmers are running back to the cities, basically saying that there's an Aequian army marching on Rome. They talk about it as though it's a whole entire army, not just some small group of men that took their stuff. And so Rome panics, clear back wherever Rome is, long ways away. They panic, thinking that an actual Aequian army is coming on them and coming to take the city with both their consular armies out there. So they send a message to one of the consuls, basically, you need to get back ASAP. Apparently an army got past you. Now he comes back, so one of their armies comes back. He comes back, no army. He goes marching around the land. Yeah, there's some reports of some plundering, but no army. And so he spends his time searching for a ghost army that doesn't exist. And then gets after the plebs for freaking out about nothing. The other consul, who was left up here, he realizes what it is that these guys are doing. And so he predicts the pass that they're going to take back with their plunder. And he has his army split up into a bunch of ambushes. And so some small group of Aequians, they came here, they got some plunder, and there's an obvious road that they're going to take back with their plunder. So he had some small group of his men set up on sides of the road. When they're coming along, attack him, take back the plunder. And so all these groups on their way back end up getting treated basically like the way brigands would, ambushed in their little packs, and all the plunder gets brought back to Rome, and he continues pushing them all the way back out of their lands and doing some plundering of his own. So the plan of the Aequians, first they lose the pitched battle, then they're able to plunder, but they're not able to get away with their plundering. And then once Rome dealt with their army, able to do some plundering of its own.
It didn't occur to them that they could just split up their army into a bunch of smaller armies and fight the same tactic.
Well, when you're in these big armies, it's going to be largely about the morale of the army as opposed to the skill of the individual soldier. The smaller the combat is, the more that the skill of the individual matters. So that's why, I think that's why they were largely thinking that way. Because it's not really going to apply here, but when it gets to the point where the Romans are like fighting the Gauls, the Romans are going to be much smaller than the Gauls in terms of actual stature. And so it's kind of funny to the Gauls at first, these Romans fighting them, these little guys, when they're big guys. Because one-on-one, one Gaul against one Roman, you destroy the poor guy. But then you got 1,000 Romans versus 1,000 Gauls, and suddenly they're just striking them. And so we'll see that type of thing. Relative to the, I don't know, the height differences and the size differences of the personnel here.
What are they called?
The Aequians?
Aequians. Their assumption was that they could fight the Romans better in smaller groups.
Yes.
Like they're designed for. But then they still got destroyed in small groups against small groups.
Well, they didn't really fight in small groups. They went and raided, unopposed, got their plunder, and it's when they were bringing their plunder back that they were ambushed.
By small groups.
By small groups. But they didn't have the element of surprise. The other guys did.
Right.
At least that's the way it came off. Okay, so did that. So now this is skipping forward. That's why I just said war with the Aequi. So multiple years here. So now skipping forward a year or two, not sure how far into the future. Again, the Aequi decide to attack. This time they're attacking Hernici land, thinking that they'll have a better time of it. Now, one of the Roman consuls, knowing that the Hernici are being attacked, instantly rushes to their aid as fast as he can. So he rushes out to fight them, loses the battle against them instantly, and so falls back into his camp. So now you have the Romans inside their camp, with the Aequians basically surrounding them so that they can't get out of their camp. They're so surrounded in their camp, and they're in such a poor position that every messenger that they tried to send out of the camp ends up being captured by the Aequians. So the Aequians basically getting ready to starve them out of their camp if they have to. Fortunately, some Hernici who noticed the Romans lose that attack instantly sent a message to Rome that, hey, this has happened. And so, here I said the other consul. The other consul, at this time, he's either fighting the Sabines or the Volsci, can't remember which. And so the other consul with the other army, he's occupied somewhere else in the world. There he is. Clear away from it all. No chance of him coming and resolving this issue. And so what ends up happening is, I think it's, once again, Quintus Fabius. He is elected to be a proconsul. Someone who had been consul before, who we're going to, for the short term, give you more consular powers to go deal with this. And so he, in a state of emergency, basically is forced to gather up the fighting men that he can find at Rome and just leave with whoever's there. Remember, both the armies are gone. So he just gathers up whatever fighting men he can. At the same time, the instant Rome got the message from the Hernici that was happening, Rome then sent messages to the allies saying, send us armies as fast as you can. So other Latin towns saying, send us armies, other Hernici cities that aren't somehow occupied, send us armies. And so we can take an entire allied army and go fight and relieve these guys. And so they're able to do that. They go and leading out the army with all the allies, they're able to fight the two battles at the same time, fight from both sides, and end up winning once again against the Aequi. And I think in this battle, the consul of the army that got trapped was killed in the process or injured in the process. So very rough for the army that was stuck there. For this army that came and helped him, not so bad. So Quintus Fabius entrusted with basically having a third army on the fly to go and relieve one of the consuls that got himself trapped. As a little side note, Antium, that new city, was one of the cities that was supposed to send allies. Their 1,000 soldiers show up after the entire conflict is well done with. So it was obvious that they had dragged their feet and weren't really supplying like they were supposed to. And so, once again, you can see that city of Antium primed for rebellion. Okay. And so with that, they're able to win, go home, celebrate their triumphs, I believe, from all their spoils. Because I think the other consul, whatever he did, had a fine time. I don't think anything bad happened with him. Any questions there? Okay. And sometime, I think while one of these battles was going on, Rome performed its census, and we actually have the number from the census. So, just an interesting note. They performed the census, 124,214 citizens. Now, these aren't full-blown citizens. This is including wives and children of citizens, as well as citizens themselves. So, I'll give you a sense for the number there. So, this would not include foreigners, and this would not include slaves. Okay, now 463 BC, a massive plague breaks out in Rome. Now, the plague is hitting them so hard that Rome realizes that they're not really going to be able to defend themselves. They're not going to be able to send troops out to go fight. And so they tell the surrounding people that you need to come inside the walls of Rome, which makes it worse. So you need to come inside the walls of Rome. You need to bring all your livestock with you, all your animals with you, so that they don't get taken away, because we're not going to be able to defend you. And so all the people crowding in Rome, with all the animals crowding in Rome, just causes the disease to spread even worse. And so disease is spreading throughout Rome. In particular, I don't know how the disease is spreading, but somehow it seems like whatever is causing it, it's happening disproportionately amongst the patricians. So something with whatever the patricians were engaging with, like some sort of meat probably that was a more expensive meat or something, causing the disease to spread. I don't know what the disease was from. Anyways, it wipes out not only a good chunk of the patricians, but it wipes out a good chunk of the magistrates in the city, the people in government positions responsible for running the government. And so both consuls end up dying from the plague that year, and just a majority of leading men in general. I think it got to the point where the aediles were the ones that pretty much had to run Rome themselves until the next elections could occur. So, good chunk of patricians die, surrounding population, they all gather inside the walls, just making it worse. And Rome sends messages to the Hernici and the Latins saying, if any attacks happen this year, you guys pretty much are on your own. Which terrifies the Hernici and the Latins, because up till now, they've had to use Rome's help to fight with the enemy. And still, there were times where it was like a close call. And so they're terrified that they might have to fight these guys without any Roman help.
Is this plague widespread?
I could not find good references of the same plague in other places.
Weird.
Now, it could very well be the case that plagues are spreading at a slower rate at the time. And maybe this is somehow the same plague that ends up hitting Athens. When would that be? 20 years later? So I have no idea. And we do know, not that long ago, there was major disease going on with the Volsci and the Aequi at the same time that Rome was having their famine. And so maybe it's the same disease from that. I just don't know.
Maybe, one, there's a quarantine. They don't mix very often because they're enemies. Two, it could have been a local cuisine for water supply.
Yeah, could have been polluted water supply, bad well. I don't know.
Especially if it's targeting a subset of the Roman.
Yeah, it's weird how much it seems to have affected the patricians. Now, maybe it's hitting the whole population that hard, and it's just patricians are better reported how hard it hit them. So that could also be the case. Actually, I bet that is the case, because now that we're saying this, I remember Livy talking about how they were so depleted for troops that even when it came to posting sentinels on the walls to just guard Rome, oftentimes senators had to go stand there because there just weren't other people to fall back on. So maybe it didn't hit the patricians harder than the plebs, and it just hit everyone pretty hard. Now, your consuls dying, understand your consuls are always going to be older men, so maybe that one's not as surprising.
Yeah,
Are typically going to be older men. Okay, so anyways, here's Rome hiding behind their walls. They gathered up everything around them. the Volsci and the Aequi, time to go have fun, raiding Roman lands. So they go, they're invading the Roman lands, and they're noticing something. There's not much to plunder here. And even like to take as slaves, like the people left behind are all sick. I don't want to touch them. They're going to spread disease. And the animals left behind look like they're diseased animals. And everything that the Romans have to offer just kind of looks gross. They debate, should we try taking the Roman city? And the conversations had amongst them, what are we going to find? More of this? I don't want more of this. And so they go, they raid the Roman lands and kind of decide that there's not really much to take, and so they decide to move on to the Allied lands. And so they're going to go invade Latin lands, and they're going to go invade Hernici lands, and they're going to have a lot of success gathering up plunder. And the poor Hernici and Latins trying to fight them off end up suffering significant defeats. And Levy says that the Allies lost as much fighting in battles as the Romans lost from disease. So their allies also had an awful time of it. So, good year for the Volsci and the Aequi. Let's see. So, in particular, around the Latins, it was the Tusculan territory that was hit hard, in particularly by the Aequi. And so, the guys from Tusculum are going to have a special hatred of the Aequians from here on out. Suffered huge defeat. Okay. And now the plague creates a huge leadership vacuum inside of Rome because all the elderly leading men were largely the people who were hit. So that's what the plague does. That's what happens in the plague year. Now, once the plague finally goes, I don't know if this is a year later, a couple of years later, how much time has passed, but once Rome has finally recovered from the plague and the soldiers are no longer sick and Rome's ready to go field two armies, they've got some vengeance to take upon the Aequian and the Volscis. So fast forward a year or two, however long it is, when the Aequians and the Volscis are attacking, Rome sends out their two consuls, and they go and they win their respective victories. So both consuls go, one against the Aequi and the other one against the Volsci. Now against the Volsci had some strange plan. Not sure exactly what it was, but basically, so you got the Romans and you got the Volsci down here, and the Romans and the Volsci fight, the Romans win the battle. What the Volsci seem to do is intentionally break up their army and hide like chunks of them around. I guess like the thinking being once Rome leaves, we'll pretend that we were retreating, but really we were just hiding out and we'll continue our plunder. Something like that. I'm not sure exactly what it was. But where they end up hiding their armies is largely in valleys. So valleys being between two mountains, you got your army between the two mountains. And so what the Romans are able to do is, seeing that these armies are there, somehow tracking them and realizing that this is what their strategy is just take their armies on the entrance to the valley and the exit to the valley and trap them in the valley. And now when your guys retreat, there's nowhere for them to retreat to. And so it is just massive defeats for the Volsci. They end up losing roughly 13,000 troops in all these battles, which is huge. Understand, a fully fielded Roman army at this time, I think, is about 20,000 troops. And so losing 13,000, if they can field roughly proportional armies, that is a huge portion of their army, 65% of their men, gone.
Seems like every time they try to get cute with their strategies,
Backfires.
I'm not positive exactly what their strategy was or what they were thinking, something like that, but yeah, they get trapped in these valleys where there's no escape, and Rome has a heyday with them.
Makes me wonder if those ever worked, and that's why they had the courage to keep trying things like this, and Rome just never recorded it.
Rome didn't record the tricks that
all
worked.
the embarrassing ones that they built.
Yeah, that's smart.
And so with that, the Aequians beat again, the Volscis particularly humiliated. The plague now gone, things are roughly returning back to normal in Rome. And when things are back to normal in Rome, what happens?
I gotta fight.
The plebs and the patricians have to go to start fighting over some new law.
Before we keep going, is there anything that they put in place to ensure that on the event that they have a plague, that it's not as bad as it was?
I don't know how much they would have understood how this plague was working. Because what did they do to get rid of the plague? They did all sorts of, they're doing all sorts of rituals and stuff. One of the things is all the women took their hair and cleaned all the temples with the hair to make things right with the gods. And it just Rome goes through and does all the things to try and appease the gods that they're trying to do. So, guess
Yeah.
there you have it.
It's
Make your
perceived,
sacrifices more frequently.
Yeah.
Pay better attention to the auspices.
So it's more
Listen to your
perceived as
local
a
logger.
curse. Right.
Yes, weather and famine and disease are largely going to be attributed to the gods.
So
And so one of their famines, I think in particular, was due to the raining season going particularly long, and so they couldn't plant the crops early enough or something like that.
So they don't, whenever they attribute to the gods, they're generally less likely to put structures in place to prevent it from happening in the future. A good example is leaving their allies out in the open like that. It seems like they would, you know, put in like a small regiment of army, or the Latins could come together and take care of them on the event that they're not available. I don't know. Seems like that's work. Yeah.
No clue if they put any system in place like that, but not that I read, or remember reading, I should say. Okay, so plague dealt with at home, foreign threats dealt with. Now back to fighting over our next law. While the two consuls were outside the city, one dealing with the Aequi, one winning that great victory over the Volsci, one of the tribunes there in the city, Gaius Terentilius, proposes a new law. The law he proposes is that we should pass a law selecting a commission of 5 men, and those 5 men will put into writing everything the consuls are allowed to do. So basically right now, the consular power is basically a leftover of the kingship. And there aren't really limits as to what a consul can and cannot do. And so they want to put into writing all the consular powers so that there's no chance of the consuls abusing their powers. That makes sense what they're after?
Yeah.
Now, it's worth noting at this time that all Roman laws are completely oral laws at this point. There is not written down laws. That's just not a thing. And so when a law is passed, everyone just kind of knows that's a law. And what are the laws? You kind of just remember what the laws are. And this is why precedent and law are so kind of vaguely meshed together. What exactly is a law versus what exactly is just something that we do because it's what we do? There's not a very clear line between those two things. And so they want to put in writing exactly what the consular laws, the consular powers are, so that consuls can never abuse their powers again. Now, the problem with this is the consuls, they have arbitrary power over people because what the laws are kind of arbitrary. And so what a consul can do is kind of just whatever the situation needs them to do. And so the way the patricians view this is you're just trying to stick the consuls in a box, and then you'll use some technicality to stop them from doing whatever thing it is that they're trying to do if you don't like it. And so patricians are opposed to it on that grounds. Second, trying to pass this law, this is completely outside tribunal authority. Now, the tribunes before, remember the law that they were trying to pass is a law about how you elect tribunes. Now, while the patricians disagreed that that only had to do with the plebs, they could kind of rationalize their way and say, okay, we'll give you that one. This one definitely is not them passing a law that has to do with the plebs. This is them passing a law that not only has to do with the patricians, has to do with the patricians with the highest authority in the entire state. This is not a law that you get to pass. And so, while the consuls are outside the city and the tribunes have no opposition, they try to offer up this law and get it passed. Quintus Fabius, he was left as a city prefect, basically the one guarding the city. He's the one who gets after him at the time, saying, no, you're not going to try and pushing this through while the consuls are here. It's not even something you're allowed to do. If you think that it's something you're allowed to do, at the very least, wait until the consuls return. And he talks the other tribunes into getting after Gaius here and say, you need to rein in your fellow tribune, essentially, until the consuls get back. And the other tribunes agree that that's the right thing to do, so they don't try pushing forward with this law. And Quintus Fabius points out, if a consul is going outside their authority, you already have the power to limit the consul action by saying veto. It's kind of like what your position is setting the limits on consular power. You just actually have to veto it. So there's his arguments against it. They end up putting off the law, or end up putting it off until the consuls now return to Rome. So after the consuls return, first they have to have their triumph. And what they do is they return all the goods to the citizens that had been taken by the Aequi and the Volsci over the past years. And so basically, they bring back the plunder and make like a giant pile of it, and say, everyone who you've lost lands from, you've lost property to these guys over the past years, basically whatever your record is, bring your receipts and come gather up whatever would compensate you for what you lost. And then the rest they just sell and it goes to the state treasury. So compensate the people for everything that they've lost over the past couple of years dealing with these guys raiding their lands. And they continue to hold off this law being voted upon. And the way that they hold off on the law being voted upon is by levying the army. Now, why does levying the army stop the law from being voted on? The only way to vote on a law like that would be by century, which is the army. So when the consuls levy the army and just take them outside of Rome, no law can be passed if they've got the whole army with them. So make sure you gather up the army and walk out, and that stops the law from going forward. So when we say that laws are delayed due to some external threat, that is going to be why. And so Rome's saying, the consuls are going to say, nope, we can't vote on this right now, we got to levy the armies because we got a threat from the Volsci and the Aequi. In particular at this time, they were getting word that Antium was getting ready to rebel, and that they were going to go back to the Volsci. And so they would have to go deal with the Volsci again before Antium gets too bold, so to speak.
Volsci could just like walk into that castle or city and everyone would welcome.
Right. How many people in the city would be willing to open the gates for him? Yes. So if the Volsci are coming, Rome's going to have to hurry up and get there and try to get to the army before the army can get to Antium. So that's the reason that the consuls are levying the army, is to deal with these threats. The tribunes start spreading rumors that this is all just a great conspiracy, that actually the Aequians and the Volsci and Antium are all fine, and they're just using this as an excuse to levy the army so that we can't pass this law. So they continue to block the tribunes from levying the army, and the consuls continue to block the law. Now, how are the consuls going to block the law if they can't levy the armies? So physically, what is happening here when the tribunes are trying to get this law passed? They suggest this law. Patricians say, nope, we don't agree with that law. Instead, they try to force the law through by just taking it to the assemblies and saying, hey guys, let's vote on this law. It's illegal to get the assembly together to vote on a law like this. What do you, as a patrician or a consul, do? You have to stop the people from voting on the law. The only way to stop them from voting on the law is to physically break up the assembly, physically remove them from the area, so that they can't gather by century and pass their votes. So that's the only way that they can do this. So tribunes are illegally trying to pass a law. Now patricians are going to have to illegally exert violence against them to break up these actual centuries so that they can't gather up and vote.
Is it illegal to try to stop someone from doing something illegal?
That's going to be the question you have. Understand, remember, there's no written law that you can go look it up. Oh, what does the book say? That's not a thing. So they're doing something, it's understood, well, it's actually illegal for them to be doing this, and it's understood that you don't get just go exert violence against a fellow Roman citizen.
That's a breaking a law.
You're breaking an understood convention, right? And so that's what you have going here. Tribune's law and consul's levy are both being blocked and being blocked by violence. And that's the way it's being done. Now the magistrates themselves, the actual patricians who hold government positions, try to avoid being the one to actually break up the assembly of people. They think that that would in some sense be degrading to the position. A consul shouldn't actually be out there breaking up the assembly. And so they're relying on patrician private citizens to be the ones to break up the assembly anytime they try to gather together to vote. Make sense? Now, one of these patrician young men goes by the name of Caeso. Caeso Quinctius. And he's just some big, strong youth in the patrician's family who's really good at breaking up these groups of people and at pushing people over and making sure they actually split up and can't vote. And on top of that, he's a very good at giving speeches. He's a great public speaker. So he does a fantastic job at talking people out of even trying to pass a law, convincing them that that's something that they shouldn't do. And he's physically a big, tough guy. And so he's helping the patricians actually break up the assembly of the people anytime they try to go illegally vote. So that's Caeso. How do the plebs feel about Caeso? They hate him. He's pushed them over like 8 times. 2 of them have been punched or whatever. Big physical guy who's been picking on him. Now, the tribunes, they tried to force the law through. They've got patricians physically stopping them from forcing the law through. What's our next step? Let's get rid of the patricians who are physically stopping us from forcing the law through. Since all the patricians stopping us from forcing the law through are private citizens and not magistrates. You can't bring trial against the magistrates. You can do it to just a private citizen. So Caeso, he's a good example of someone who keeps giving us a hard time. So a bunch of tribunes get together and they decide that they're going to bring charges against him so that they can drive him out of the city, make an example of him, so to speak, so that the other patricians are afraid to do what Caeso is doing so well. And so they start bringing a bunch of accusations against Caeso, saying that he's been abusing the plebs. And in particular, so you have a bunch of plebs bringing accusation against him, saying that he's doing all these terrible things. On the other hand, you have patricians coming to his defense, looking good.
Shucks. You're too nice.
You have patricians coming to his defense, talking about what a great soldier that he has been in Rome, and what his accomplishments are. And so you have both these things being weighed. Should we bring any trial against Caeso? Should we not bring any trial against Caeso? The people are kind of debating it, until a former tribune accuses him, essentially, of murder. So this former tribune, he says, my brother, back when we were hit with the plague, he got sick. Before he had fully recovered, he had come to vote on one of these things. Caeso, in breaking up our block, had punched my brother, and he fell. And that fall caused him to become even more injured, and it basically pushed him past the tipping point and caused him to ultimately die. Because Caeso punched him when he was ill. So because of that, this is happening in a very public way. This tribune gets up, gives this speech, this former tribune, but the people would have known him very well. So a brother of a former tribune had been murdered by Caeso is the story. That's being told right there in public, and so instantly the crowd becomes enraged. And then in there they want to kill Caeso. Instead, the tribunes appoint a trial date for him, and they decide we'll just lock him up until the trial date, and we'll give him his fair trial, and we'll deal with him then. And so, Caeso being put in prison, the patricians, they don't like that, being put in prison over these accusations, and so he's actually let out on bail, and it's the first instance of bail I've ever come across that far back. So he has to show up on his trial date. If he doesn't show up on a trial date, he's going to be fined this great big fine. Well, Caeso, he knows that this trial is pretty much a foregone conclusion. He heard then and there the people in the crowd screaming, we're going to kill you anyways. Stuff like that. So people were screaming that they were already going to find him guilty at the time that his trial date was given. He's let out on bail. He decides he's not going to sit around and wait for his trial date. He's just going to get out of town. So he decides to run off to the Etruscan towns. And so he's essentially exiled. Now, we lose track of what happens to him in history, but essentially it seems like he dies shortly thereafter, runs into some trouble, however. We don't really know. So, yeah, too bad. Turns out he essentially died anyways. Now, remember, he was out on bail. He left, so he didn't show up for his trial date. So he owes lots of money. Well, he's not there to owe the money. So now who owes the money? Well, his father owes the money now, because his father is largely responsible for him. He's part of his father's household. His father is Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus. And so we often refer to him just as Cincinnatus through history, and pretty famous name. So poor Cincinnatus, his father, has his son driven out of the city, lost his son. On top of that, Cincinnatus has to pay this great fee. He loses the vast majority of his wealth in it, and he's left with a small 4-acre farm on the north side of the Tiber that he now goes and works his little farm. So there's Cincinnatus working his little farm, lost his wealth because of this accusations against his son. Caeso potentially dies shortly after, most likely. Okay, well that worked from the tribune's perspective. We got rid of Caeso. Now let's see what those people dare to do. So they've got their new thing. We're going to gather the people, we're going to try forcing through the law. The only way that the patricians can stop this is by exerting violence against us. We bring trial against them for the violence, and we can drive them out of town. We got our playbook. And so there's your playbook. Well, friends of Caeso, other patricians, are outraged by what happened to Caeso. And so Livy says that the people complained that for one Caeso, 1,000 had started up. So now all the patricians used are now acting how Caeso did before, and exerting violence against them anytime they try to gather an assembly. Now you can't bring a trial against all 1,000 of them. None of them being making themselves stand out as much as Caeso did, but all of them kind of helping a little bit to make sure that happens. On top of that, these young patricians, they come up with a new plan, and their new plan is to essentially kill the plebs with kindness. So outside of when the plebs are actually gathering for the assembly to force through this law, outside of that, these patricians go out of their way to be very nice to them. They host them to all sorts of entertaining activities. They socialize with them. They basically treat them like their brothers. It's only when you gather for this illegal law that suddenly now we're enemies. So one night we're playing poker, the next I'm punching you in the face because you're trying to vote on that law again. Was it funner when we were just playing poker? Quit it. And so this strategy seems to be working. The plebs are kind of starting to like them and don't really want to bring the charges against all these people. And so their plan kind of works, stopping the tribunes' plan. And even when the tribunes, once again, re-elect themselves, the patricians refuse to be critical of them. So they're going to just kill them with kindness and not say anything bad about the tribunes or the plebs. And it's only when they go for this law that we're going to go after them. Go ahead.
Is that specifically the young ones? Like the older guys were in the Senate?
The older guys were kind of stepping back anyways. It was the younger guys who were physically breaking up the assembly.
Right.
And so yes, it's specifically the younger guys who are doing this. No question? Okay. And so the tribunes are kind of stuck now because the plebs are kind of becoming complacent with their new situation. They're kind of okay with the way things are going. But the tribunes want to push forward this law. Understand, every time a tribune pushes for election, it's going to be part of his campaign is, I'm going to be the one to pass through this law and be the one to help the people get their liberty, get their freedom, whatever. So they're going to be largely campaigning on that every time they campaign. And so suddenly, if they don't have the will of the people behind them, there's nothing they can really do. And so they got to work up the people again and get them outraged again at the patricians. And in an attempt to do that, to work up the plebs, they start stirring up conspiracies about how the patricians are secretly out to kill them. And that this is all just to somehow get you complacent so that the patricians can assassinate us all. And in fact, Caeso himself has snuck it back into the city, and he's the one leading these assassination attempts against us. Making up these conspiracies to try and work the people up to get them to be willing to go and violently pass the law anyways. Go ahead.
Why did they pick Caeso of all people? Because he's against the patricians, isn't he?
No, he was.
No, Caeso is a patrician.
Oh, he is. Oh,
He's a patrician youth.
You're right. Yeah,
So Cato was a patrician youth, stopping the plebs from passing the law. His friends now, a bunch of other patrician youths, were the ones ensuring
doing
it.
it. Yeah,
This
okay.
kind of indicates that the plebs, their lifestyle is not near as bad as it used to be. If they're not that motivated to support the tribunes, that means that things are pretty nice.
I don't know how to compare those types of things, and maybe you just become complacent with your bad situation.
They've
I don't
never
know.
had that issue before, where the plebs were not supporting the tribunes at all costs.
Yeah, this killing with kindness seems to be extra effective.
Yeah.
And so the tribunes had to come up with an entirely new strategy to try and work up the plebs. Okay, so now, in the year 460 BC, I guess. I feel like we went back in time. No? Okay. 460. Went ahead. Okay. Appius Herdonius. He is a Sabine. He's an exiled Sabine who's back in Roman territory.
Exiled to Rome?
No, exiled from Rome, of Sabine origin, coming back.
He's exiled to Sabine.
He's of Sabine origins.
He was exiled to Sabine, now he's back.
He was punished by the Romans, and now he's coming back
And he's
to
also
the city of
a
Rome.
descendant of the city.
And he's a descendant of the Sabines.
Got it.
So he, together with other exiles and other slaves and other foreigners, decide to gather up an army inside the city of Rome and take the Capitoline Hill. So, total of 4,500 of them arm themselves there inside the city of Rome and go and quickly take the Capitoline Hill. Anyone who refuses to join them in their conspiracy, essentially, they instantly kill. On the Capitoline Hill, that's where the city's citadel is. So one night they pull off this attack. They've been organizing it, now they pull off the attack. 4,500 of them taking the city citadel.
Because it's one of the 7 hills.
It's one of the 7 hills. The Capitoline Hill is one of the 7 hills. It's the hill that has the city citadel on it. So the fortress inside of Rome, your fallback if Rome ever gets taken, you go inside the citadel. It's like a fortress inside the city. So they're fortified inside the city, and on top of that, since they have the Capitoline Hill, that's kind of like your high-end district, your downtown type area of the city. And so it's also where a bunch of your temples are, in particular, the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. So one night, they go, they seize all that, and take control up there of the Capitoline Hill inside the city of Rome itself. That happens at night. So in the morning, people are waking up to this commotion that the enemy's in the city, and that they've taken the Capitoline Hill. The Senate quickly gathers together, and they have no clue what has gone on here. And so they're trying to debate. The Senate starts debating over what action should we take. Because they're not sure, are we dealing with a slave revolt here? Is it a bunch of slaves who went and took to the hill? Was this some Volscian sort of conspiracy where a bunch of them had snuck into the city, or Sabines or Aequians, and they had taken the Capitoline Hill? Or is this some sort of plebeian uprising where they had gone and taken the Capitoline Hill? In particular, the Capitoline Hill also would have been, if you're more high-end hill, it's largely a bunch of senators and patricians that were killed in seizing that hill. It would have been your wealthier people that would have been living up in this area. So it's very possible that this could be a plebeian conspiracy from their point of view. The one that they're most worried about is that this is somehow a Volscian or an Aequian or a Sabine conspiracy, and that what's going on here is they sent an army into the city to take the citadel. So you've got Rome here, the Capitoline Hill, there's your citadel inside a fortress. They're worried that another army is approaching to take the city and attack the city from the outside, and now they're going to be fighting a war on 2 fronts. So they're not sure exactly what's going on here, and one of the things they're debating is whether or not they should arm the citizens. Should we arm the citizens? Because remember, one of the options is we're potentially dealing with plebeian uprising here. So the Senate, they're sitting there debating what to do. One of the consuls, Publius Valerius, he says, what are we talking about? Of course we should arm the citizens. We need to hurry up and deal with this situation. Our capital, our citadel has been taken. Well, why are we sitting here arguing about this, discussing it? And the other consul, Gaius Claudius, he says, let's delay action, let's gather information, let's see what's going on. So, Consul Publius Valerius, he can't believe what is going on here. Now, as soon as they found out that the Capitoline had been taken, one of the things that they had done is at least taken a good handful of soldiers as quickly as they could and armed them basically to post a perimeter around here, and you can quickly report if anything goes wrong. You see anyone coming attacking, make sure you attack back, that kind of thing. Well, while Consul Publius Valerius is sitting here with the Senate, listening to them debate about what they should do, when he thinks it's beyond obvious what they should do, he finds out that the tribunes had actually called together an assembly of the people. And that the tribunes had told all these people to lay down their arms and come gather in the forum, wherever the forum is, and come listen to the tribunes talk. And this blows his mind, so he leaves the Senate to do their arguing while he goes and he finds out what's going on with the tribunes. And so he goes out there and he's listening to the tribunes addressing the assembly of the people. And what are the tribunes claiming? They're claiming that This is all a farce that the patricians are putting on to stop us from passing our law. There isn't really some revolt going on in the Capitoline. The senators are just pretending. And as soon as we pass our law, the senators will give up this pretense and we'll find out that everything was really just fine and there's nothing to worry about. The senators are just trying to take us in. And so let's just get together and let's go ahead and we'll pass our law and we'll see that everything's going to be fine. And so the people, they are dropping their arms, leaving their posts, going and gathering in the assembly. Well, there's this army up on the Capitoline Hill. Publius Valerius is mind-blown. He's got senators over here bickering about what they should do. He sees the people leaving their posts so that these guys aren't even being encased on the Capitoline Hill. And now the assembly's going to go and they're going to try forcing their law through. Like, it's just the same thing that they would do if Rome was at total peace. So he shows up to see this going on with the assembly. He's mind-blown. And he just instantly starts getting after the tribunes. He says, what are you guys doing? Trying to force this law through while there's an enemy up here on the hill. He tries really hard to get them to see that what they're doing is crazy. And he says, I am going to take up arms. And I'm going to try and talk as many of you as I can into taking up arms and coming with me to fight. This is our enemy that we have right here. Rome herself is under threat. And so anyone who tries blocking my actions is trying to block me from protecting Rome. If you are an enemy against me, you are an enemy of the state, and I will treat you as such. I'm going to go fight. I'm going to get as many people as I can to go fight with me. And if you get in my way, I'm going to kill you. Not I'm going to push you over. Not it won't be pleasant for you with some mean words. I will kill you. And he's making that very clear. I am an armed man, and I can't remember his exact terminology. I will treat you as an armed man. Can't remember. Has some quote. Anyways, he makes it very clear to these tribunes, you're not getting in my way. I'm going to go forward with this. So he decides he's going to take up arms, and anyone that refuses will become an enemy of the state in his minds. So are you going to come fight with Rome, or are you going to in some way get in the way? So the people end up taking up arms and agreeing to take up arms and to go help him fight. Now, he gives as a concession that after this is done, if it's that stupid law you care so much about, fine. I'll agree to support you in helping pass that law. But let's get rid of the immediate threat here. Now, all these deliberations and everything that happens here happened over the course of an entire day. So throughout that day, they found out the Capitoline was taken. They posted the guards around there. They gathered. They had their deliberations or fighting, blah, blah, blah. It's at the end of the day that he's finally convinced the people to take up arms, but they can't go and reconquer the Capitoline at night. So they have to wait for the next day. And the next day, when the Romans wake up, gather up their army to go do that, they look outside their walls and they see a big army out here. An army from the city of Tusculum. Yeah, so at first they're really terrified until they talk to soldiers from Tusculum. And the army at Tusculum says, we had got word that the Capitoline Hill had been taken in Rome. And so we had gathered our army as quickly as we could, rather than waiting to be told by the Romans that we need your help. And we had marched down here as quickly as we could to assist you in retaking the Capitoline Hill. And so Rome wipes their brow, okay, phew, and lets them inside. And the two armies go and they retake the Capitoline Hill, retake the citadel. Now, it's probably a good thing that they showed up, because even though there's only 4,500 troops in here, when you're fighting from such a defensive position, it's hard to uproot you. So it's still a hard-fought battle, even though they drastically outnumber the people holding the citadel. And that's why, because it's so well defended. And so it's some terrible fighting for the Romans. They're able to retake the citadel. The leader who was leading all this, Herdonius, that man that exiled Sabine, they're able to kill him. But Valerius, the consul, he also died as being the one leading the charge to go retake the Capitoline Hill. And the leading tribune, who was one of the people trying to force the law through with the assembly this whole time, he also died. So two sides kind of lose a guy.
The guy that was saying it was a farce ended up dying in the battle?
Yes.
And the guy that said he would talk to him about it. Once
And
it's
the
over.
consul who promised to support the law
Yeah, he was gonna support it.
also died.
Also died.
Wow, that's a...
And
And
so,
also the guy who led the attack. So
and also the leading attacker.
All
And
sides.
Everyone.
yep, so
That's nice.
all sides lost a leader, you could say. They deal with the rebellion, and they're very grateful to the soldiers from Tusculum. Thanks for showing up, guys. That was very nice. And they go their separate ways. Now, one of the consuls is dead. So they're going to have to select a new consul. So they're going to have like mid-year elections to hurry up and select someone to step into that office to finish out the year. Now, the people tell the surviving consul, Gaius Claudius, that they had been promised that Publius Valerius would allow them to debate this law, basically in public, and he promised that he would support it. But at the very least, he promised that we would be able to discuss the law with the people. And so Gaius Claudius, he says that he will allow them to continue to debate the new law until another consul is elected. And you can speak on it as freely as you want, just don't try forcing through the vote. And you can try to convince people and let the system play out. So that's what he agrees to do, trying to the best of his ability, honor what his dead consul said he would do for him.
What's the gist of this new law?
The gist of the new law is that they want to put in writing all the consular powers. So everything a consul can do, they want to put in writing, the plebs do. So that there's no chance of abusing powers. The consuls don't like that because they have to deal with all sorts of arbitrary situations, and what the laws are right now are somewhat arbitrary. There's no written laws in Rome at this time. And so that just puts a bunch of red tape around them, and on top of that, the whole point of the tribune is to stop consulars from overstepping their authority. If they're doing something that they shouldn't do, that's what the tribunes are for. You tell us, nope, you can't do that. You have the power of veto already. So they just view it as putting them in a box by 5 people, whoever get appointed. So the law actually says appoint 5 people to write down what the consular powers are. And whoever those 5 people are would have a stupid amount of power in Rome. Okay, did I go forward? This is the name of the law. The Lex Terentilia, the law proposed by Terentilius, was the tribune who proposed the law. The tribune who died trying to retake I think he was the one that died. Okay, so now, unfortunately for the plebs, the consul who got elected to serve out the next 6 months or whatever was Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus, or as we refer to him, Cincinnatus, father to Caeso. How does he feel about the plebs? Not too good. So he replaces Valerius as consul, and he knows exactly what the plebs are going to go back to fighting about. And so first thing he does is he's going to get everyone together and address everyone. And he has something to say to just about everyone in the crowd. So when he gets up there, first people he gets after is the consuls. He says, by your failure to function as magistrates in the city and to tolerate them even trying to illegally push forward this law, you forced private citizens to function in a violent manner to break up the assembly to stop them from breaking up the law. People like my son, who is now dead, thanks to you guys being cowards and not upholding the law the way that you're supposed to. So first thing he does is he rips into the magistrates, some of his own people, calling them cowards, and then he turns to the tribunes. He says, you tribunes are illegally pushing laws to try and bound consuls by laws. Do you not see the irony in what you're doing right now? You have no authority to do this. On top of that, when you fail to illegally push forward with your laws, you then bring the illegal trials against us. Against public citizens who oppose you in illegally pushing forward your law. People, once again, like his son. And he says, you're trying to limit the consuls with laws when you yourselves are constantly ignoring laws. One of the most basic laws that we have, you tribunes, is that you cannot run for office when you oversee the elections. At this point, the tribunes he's dealing with, many of them had served 5 consecutive terms. That's 5 years in a row. They should have only been able to do one of those. So you want to pass these laws that bound us consuls by laws when you refuse to follow even the most basic law we tried to enforce upon you? So he rips into the tribunes. Oh, it was only 3 years now, but a bunch of them are going to stick around for another 2 years when someone has to yell at him again. They'll be a different guy. And now he has special words for Aulus Virginius, one of the tribunes. He says, Aulus Virginius, this tribune, he's more of an enemy to us than Herdonius, the guy who just led the slave revolt, ever was. Herdonius, he declared himself an enemy, and the best he did was gave us an enemy to fight. Aulus Virginius, he talked you people into laying down your very arms. Who put Rome at more risk? The man who disarmed all of Rome, or the man who put together an army of 4,500 men to fight Rome? He says, here is our great enemy of the state. I think that this is the one who actually died. But he's saying you tribunes are functioning as greater enemies to Rome than people who are actually leading insurrections right here on our Capitoline Hill. And then he turns to the plebs. He says, and you plebs, when our Capitoline Hill was taken and you were called to arms, you dragged your feet. How do we respond when some brigands break into your private little house? 20 guys break into your private little house. How quick is the state to respond to make sure that you and your property are protected and we deal with that situation? And yet, the very center of our city and the home of the gods, the temples themselves were taken by these men. And look at how you dragged your feet to respond and to come to the defense of our very city and our very gods. The men of Tusculum responded faster than you. The citizens of Tusculum are better friends to Rome than her own citizens, her own plebs. So he rips into them. And so with all that, he says, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to gather up 2 armies with my fellow consul. We're going to take you out and we're going to go fight the Aequi and the Volsci. And he says, we're going to deal with this. We're going to deal with them if for no other reason, because you plebs will likely bring a situation around like this again. We got to make sure that they don't have the strength to capitalize on the situation. Imagine if one of them knew what was going on here in Rome, we would have been utterly annihilated. And so I'm going to take the armies, we're going to march out, and we're going to go make sure that that threat doesn't ever even come up, even if you plebs misbehave like this again and refuse to take up arms for your own city. And so that's what he tells them. Everyone feels humbled after Cincinnatus talks. Everyone feels a little bit mad about themselves. And so he goes and he levies the 2 armies to deal with the Volsci and the Aequi. And the tribunes, once again, not feeling humbled very long, decide they're going to block the levies. And Cincinnatus says, not this time. They already gave the military oath when they went to retake the Capitoline Hill. The military oath isn't over yet until basically the campaigning season's over. So nope, they're still under oath, and so there's nothing for you to block. They've already agreed to this. So no, we're going to take the armies and we're going to go. Now, the tribunes, again, conspiracies running wild in their heads at this time, they thought that what Cincinnatus was going to do here was take the 2 armies outside of Rome. So you got Rome here. He thought he was going to take the 2 armies outside of Rome, whatever, which is basically the full Roman army, and take some augurs with him, some priests, that they were going to dedicate some land for the purposes of voting outside of Rome. Remember that tribune's veto only applies inside of Rome. And that he was going to pass a law disavowing every law that the tribunes passed on using violence. So any law that the tribunes had to ultimately use violence to try and pass, they thought that Cincinnatus was going to do away with the 2 armies, and that he wasn't really going to go march against these 2 people. And that they might even pass some sort of law getting rid of the tribune of the plebs altogether. So the tribunes really worked themselves out, and they are really freaked out, doing everything they can to try and stop Cincinnatus from leaving with the armies. That's what they think is going to happen. So, they're freaking out about that.
That's when the trust is broken.
And so, yeah, well, they think Cincinnatus must have it out for him. If it's not his son Caeso somehow coming back from the dead to get us, it's got to be his father, right?
This probably isn't the first time something crazy like this has happened.
Who knows? Anyways, so they're so freaked out. They're doing everything in their power to stop the army from actually leaving the city. The Senate is kind of taken aback at how freaked out they are, and they say, let's calm things down. Okay, here's what we all agree to. We will order the consuls to not take the armies outside the city, and you tribunes are not going to try forcing through the law again this year. What we're going to do is let this year expire. Next year, we'll elect new consuls. And you guys, this time we mean it. You have to elect new tribunes. No more breaking the law. And with new people, things can settle, and we'll go on our merry way. Everyone likes this plan. Everyone agrees to this plan. Everyone's okay with the plan.
Even Cincinnatus?
Well, Cincinnatus, he's a man of duty. If the Senate tells him to do it, he does it. George Washington in his day was often referred to as a modern Cincinnatus, to give you a sense of the character of Cincinnatus. Okay, so that's the plan. And so election season comes up, they have to start electing, and the tribunes go ahead and they re-elect the same guys. So they instantly break their word. And so the patricians, they try to re-elect Cincinnatus to be consul again. If the tribunes are going to break the rule, the consuls, or then the patricians are going to break the rule. If the plebs will, then the patricians will, is their thinking. And when the patricians tried to re-elect Cincinnatus, he once again loses it on him. He said, "Did you not pass a law saying that this is illegal? And we are the patricians, we are not the plebs. Our job is to be an example to the state, not to follow the example of those who break the laws. So no, I will not be consul again, unless the Senate itself decrees it. And so any vote that goes for me is a wasted vote." Remember, he's one of the ones overseeing the elections as well. The consuls oversee the elections for the next guys. So no vote for me is going to count. So don't even write my name down. I am not going to be a consul. And so the election goes by, a bunch of the same tribunes are elected, and Cincinnatus crosses the river back to his little farm, and he's back to farming. And he leaves our story for a bit now. Okay, so now, fast forward next year, next 2 years, whatever, we're with the Volsci Aequi again. Back to business as usual. The Romans get word that the Volsci are once again coming to attack, and that they're going to go and take Antium. Remember, Antium, they think, is primed to revolt, so it's going to be easy pickings. So Quintus Fabius, he takes his army that he's assigned, and he has to quickly rush there and basically stop them before they can get to the city of Antium. So, not sure where it is on the map, but wherever Antium is, he's going to take his army and actually block the Volsci army from going any further. He's got to beat them to the city, worried that the city's just going to revolt and go to it. And he rushes out there, he fights them, he's able to win a battle against them. That works great. While he is doing that, I think the Sabines were also attacking. And so the other consular army is up dealing with the Sabines. Let me try and get a map here. So one of the armies, he's down here defending Antium. The other consular army, I picked a stupid map, the Sabines are up here, right? Sorry, dumb map. So the other consular army, he's up off the map dealing with the Sabines. What ends up happening is right after he is down here defending Antium from the Volsci, wins some victory against them. The Aequi, which, again, this is a terrible map. The Aequi are going to be up here, so here's going to be an Aequian town. The dark colors there. But the Aequi come and they attack the city of Tusculum. And kind of what happened in Rome with the slaves is what the Aequi do here. At night, they were able to sneak a good portion of their troops into the city of Tusculum, have those troops take the citadel from inside, while the rest of the army waited outside. And so you had this problem in Tusculum. So here's the city of Tusculum. You have their citadel inside the city, and inside of there, you've got Aequian troops. And outside the city, you've got a bunch of Aequian troops. And so, now they're in trouble. And so, Quintus Fabius, I think it was, Quintus Fabius, as soon as he wins his victory here, gets word that Tusculum is basically under attack. And so he has to rush as fast as he can to get there as quickly as he can. And so even though they won a victory here and they got the plunder from the Volsci since they beat them, remember, every time you go on your campaigning season, you have your camp. Your camp is going to have like all your supplies in it. You would have come prepared to fight for several months. A soldier's going to bring all his belongings. He's not going to leave his money somewhere lying around. He's going to take his wealth with him. All that is coming with you. And so they had just got a great amount of plunder winning this battle, and now they got to book it. And so they have to leave that plunder behind, essentially. The soldiers don't get to take it with them, kind of hoping it's just going to be there when they come back. So they're not too happy about having to book it right after winning their victory. But that's what the situation requires. And so, when they show up, so you've got, kind of get a loose track here. So, these are the Aequi, these are the Aequi, and then you've got the Tusculan army sandwiched in between them right now. Not a good place to be, never want to be sandwiched in between. When he gets his army here, first thing he does is he starts encircling them. And so he takes his time to start building fortifications with his army surrounding their army, so that they're now sandwiched between the two of them. And he took the time at one of the portions to actually build the fortifications to one of the gates, so that they could still easily get things inside and outside the city, so that you could still supply the people and take care of the people as needed. And so now the Aequi are in a horrendous situation. Remember, you never want to be encircled. And now the Aequi are encircled. They're sandwiched between the Tusculan army and the Roman army here, or for the Roman army, with a portion of their army in the citadel and a portion of their army here. There's no chance of them getting out of this. Well, they tried to make terms with Quintus Fabius, saying, let's negotiate some peace rather than fighting. And does it have to come to violence?
Yes, it does.
And he says, while it would be much better for me in terms of reputation to kill you all and get a great triumph when I get back home, I really don't want to kill you all. And so, if you will just hand over your leaders, then I'll let the rest of your army go under yoke. So they'll have to leave all their arms behind, but they'll be allowed to all live. The leaders don't like that, so they try a last-ditch effort to try and break out. And their last-ditch effort doesn't really work out. We don't really know internally what was going inside the camp, if there was some sort of mutiny or anything like that. But what ends up happening is the leaders end up getting handed over, and the Aequi are able to leave under yoke. Remember what under yoke is? We've seen it once before, but easy to forget. You take 3 spears, tie them together, making just a little gateway. You strip the soldiers of everything. They were all allowed to keep one piece of clothing. And you force them to go under the yoke. And it's a humiliation ritual to embarrass them for losing. So with that, the Aequian army is allowed to escape with their lives. Did I go back somewhere? We're on this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the Aequi leave under yoke. Okay, so we covered all that. Now, time fast forwards a year.
Did they come back to their plunder?
Oh, sorry, yes. They were able to go back. They were able to get their plunder. And I think that they had a nice triumph, good amount of wealth.
They had a triumph anyways.
Well, because they beat the other guys. They stopped.
Yeah, so
They beat the Volsci,
Yeah.
and they went and beat the Aequi.
Yeah.
And so between the plunder of the two, things are good for the army.
Yeah.
And whatever happened with the Sabines that kept that consul occupied was not really of note. So just go, fight, come back, whatever happened, happened. They did the census again. And so this is the number reported, 117,319. So even after, this would have been, what, 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years, I don't know. Fast forward, good amount of years. The population still, I think the other one was roughly 124,000 or something like that, 123,000.
I think it dropped.
I think it was
Yeah, so it's still lower. Remember the plague.
Yeah, the plague happened.
And so they still haven't recovered to the numbers that they had before, largely because of the plague. Even though they're kind of just wrecking it on the battlefield. Okay. So now, those are the campaigns that happened. They go back to the city, and back in the city, So this would have been like 4 or 5, I don't know how many years. This is a few years now after Caeso was exiled from the city. Remember Caeso?
Yes.
And he was basically accused of being a murderer. Well, some people who had heard what he was being accused of, some friends of his, had basically tried putting together the facts to try and figure out what had actually happened. And so they talked to the tribune, who accused Caeso of killing his brother, and they got the dates that he says that this supposedly happened, and Caeso was out fighting in the military during the dates where that supposedly happened. Now maybe they were just misremembering the dates, so by talking to other members of the family of the man that Caeso was supposed to have killed, the other members of the family are reporting that no, he never went to any assembly. He had pretty much gotten sick and just kept getting iller and iller and iller until he eventually died. He was just taken by sickness. And so it's realized that Volscius, the one who brought that accusation against Caeso, was pretty much lying just to make trial of him.
Cincinnatus paid for it. He paid
And
for that.
Cincinnatus paid for it, and Caeso paid for it with his life.
His life.
And so they realized that he was most likely lying. It seems like everyone's pretty much in agreement now, the story's crumbling on, that he was pretty much lying. And so they now try to start bringing a trial against him, the patricians, some of Caeso's friends. They try bringing that trial against him. The tribunes keep vetoing the trial, saying, we'll agree to have the trial if you'll agree to pass the law that we want passed. And so they just use this as one more political point of leverage, vetoing the trial anytime they try to bring up the trial. So the trial keeps getting put off. Anytime they try to bring the trial up, the tribunes veto it. So that trial's stalled off, not going anywhere. Remember, he's a former tribune, so tribunes are his friends. And the way it comes across is that the tribunes kind of conspired to have him bring these false charges clear back when it happened. And so now that the story's collapsing in on, got to have his back, so to speak. Now, the Aequi, remember the Aequi, who a year or two ago had just been absolutely humiliated by being forced under yoke, but their army wasn't actually hurt. You know, no one was really killed. And so even though they agreed to some treaty, they instantly, or a few years later, decide that they're going to break the treaty and attack. And they coordinated their attack with the Sabines. So these two, both the groups kind of more up north, are going to attack at the same time. And so that,
Show them mercy, they come
show them mercy and they come back. And so a consul sent to deal with each army. One to deal with the Sabines, one to deal with the Aequians. Now the army that's sent to deal with the Aequians, they fight an initial battle. So there's the Aequians, here's the Romans, they each have their camp, whatever. They fight the battle, and in their rush, at the time the Aequians, they were ravaging the land of the Allies. That's how you know that they're out there. And so in an attempt, in particular, to go and help get rid of the Aequi, how can I say this better? The lands that the Aequi were ravaging were particularly around Tusculum. Now, how does Rome feel about Tusculum? They love Tusculum. Remember, Tusculum is the one that instantly responded when their citadel was taken. So they have a special love of Tusculum. And so when it's understood that the Aequi are ravaging lands around Tusculum, they rush to the battle a bit haphazardly. And so the consul there, when he gets there, he does a poor job setting up his army and kind of just rushes to rape and attack these guys. They line up, the consul loses a battle early on, and even though he has the majority of his army, he's now in his camp, he ends up getting himself surrounded. He lost enough troops that he doesn't dare take the battle to them. He's afraid that he's too outnumbered. So now he's stuck there. And his army is now completely encircled. The Aequi had just been pretty well humiliated. Likely they're going to be after revenge and come for blood. So Rome's terrified now. They instantly sent some messengers as soon as they lost that battle back to Rome that they're likely going to lose their whole army. The other consul, he can't do anything about this. He's off fighting the Sabines, dealing with his own conflict. Nothing he can do. So once again, both your armies are outside of Rome. What can you do to send support to help this guy? You might think send the allies to help them, but remember that the allies lost significant portions of their armies back when Rome fell ill to the plague. And then their allies lost, it said, basically as many people to fighting as the Romans lost to the plague. The difference is that they were largely losing their fighting force. So the military force of their allies is largely reduced. And so Rome's largely going to have to be the ones to figure out how to deal with this themselves. And so what they decide to do is appoint Cincinnatus dictator. Now there's a whole story to it. So there Cincinnatus is, north of the Tiber, working away on his farm. And he sees some senators, 3 senators I think it is, they come and they address him and they say, please put on your senator toga. We need to go back to the city. And he says, is there something wrong? Is everything okay? They say, no, everything's not okay. We need you to come back with us to the city. And so he goes with them back to the city. And as soon as he enters the city, he's instantly held dictator. And so once Cincinnatus now is appointed dictator, the plebs terrified. Again, remember the conspiracies that they've heard about this man and what he was going to do if he got those armies outside the city. And so once he's appointed dictator, and the situation is quickly explained to him what's going on, he instantly puts an end to all private business in the city. He says, every single man of fighting age, I want you to go get your military arms, get food enough for 5 days, and we're going to go meet on basically the campus marshes where we gather our army and get ready to march. He says, everyone that is not a male of fighting age, what I want you to do is to gather up encamping stakes. So these were regular stakes that soldiers would take to go fight with them to put up defenses really quick. And he says, I want each soldier to carry 12 times the normal amount. So I need you to go start ripping up materials, whatever you can find in Rome, to quickly get these stakes to load up with our soldiers, and we're going to have them take these stakes with us. So the whole city basically mobilizes. All the population getting these stakes, however they can gather them together, forming them so that the soldiers can take them. The soldiers taking a light load because they're going to have to haul 12 times as much lumber as they're used to hauling. And by the end of the day, come nighttime, he's ready to march. And he marches his men through the night, marching to where he knows that the Aequi are encamped. So now his army shows up. Here they are, seeing the situation. Now, at the time that he showed up, I think what was happening is, while he was marching there, some of the soldiers inside the encampment, not knowing what's going on, they tried fighting through the circle to try and get out, failed in the attempt, and were trying to fight their way back into the camp, back to safety. So he sees basically some of his men stuck in between them, trying to fight their way back to the camp. So he basically has his soldiers, a bunch of his soldiers, spread out, and basically give a loud roar, yell as loud as you can, to make it very clear that the Romans are here, and kind of keep them confused as to where they're coming from, while also sending a small band of men to go fight to help relieve the pressure here so that those guys can get back inside the city. So, some men doing that, some men doing that. The rest of the men, he tells, start digging your trench and putting up your posts. And we're going to encircle them. Now, what they would do, to show you some of the actual tactics, is, so you would dig down a trench and then pile it up like that. So you would dig the dirt out here, pile it up right there, and you would bury these wooden pikes on an angle like that towards the enemy over here. So if an enemy is trying to break out, they got to go down there, and then it's basically a long ways uphill, and you tilt it towards them, so it's hard for them to just tip over and get to you. Now, what are you actually fighting with? A long spear. So if you're looking out at these fences, just a bunch of posts that you've dug in the ground that are sharp on the top, sticking out like that. As the enemy comes forward, you can just stab them with your spear. And so it's very easy to defend. You've got a spear stabbing through them, down at anyone trying to come up. And they're going to have a hard time getting through. So through the night, he has his soldiers get to work digging this trench and putting in those pikes that we had you get all around the enemy. That's what the majority of them are doing. So he stopped the attack on the camp so that the soldiers could get back in the camp. I think the consul, no, the consul didn't die. He survived. I think he got wounded. Consul got wounded, but that army was able to get back inside. And his men worked throughout the night digging this trench, putting up these defenses. And when the Aequi wake up to see what's happening, they say they are completely encircled now by this army. Yeah?
Did they do that like war that you're talking about after they set up
So it was only some men that he sent out to do the roar while the majority were working.
So this is during the same time.
At the same time.
Yes, so first thing he did is sent some men out there to just yell as loud as they can, make it clear that the Romans are here. Small group to attack the group that was attacking some fellow Romans, just to relieve the attack and then fall back so that they can get back in the camp. And the majority of the army just working through the night, digging trenches, putting up these posts all the way around them. And so, come daylight, the Aequi, I see that they are completely surrounded. And so, once again, the Aequi, they surrender. Cincinnatus agrees to let them keep their lives, but he's going to force them to leave under yoke again, keeping all the plunder. Now, he says to all the soldiers present, only the men I brought get this plunder. You guys who lost, that's not yours. And he tells to the consul, you resign from your position for putting your men in this situation to begin with. And so the consul, then and there, getting scolded by Cincinnatus, resigns from being a consul to just a commander in the army, taking orders from Cincinnatus. And only the men that he brought get the plunder of the camp, not the men who got themselves in the bad situation to begin with. So Cincinnatus enjoys disciplining people who screw up.
It seems like, how on earth would they allow these people their enemy to escape through the yoke again when they just barely broke their truce?
It's very much part of the Roman ethos to be better than your enemy and to not stoop to their level. And it's part of that reputation. You know, Rome is something worth fighting for. It's different. It's better than the other people. We're in some sense superior. And so, yes, Cincinnatus, he's going to let them all leave under yoke. Only his men get the plunder. The other consul, demoted. Again, all the men, when they leave under yoke, they're only allowed to leave with just a single piece of clothing. That's all they get to take with them. In leaving, they have to go past the city of Tusculum.
Oh.
Tusculum remembers what they did last year to their citadel. And prior to that, Tusculum had lost tons of soldiers back when Rome was suffering from the plague to the Aequians. When they see the soldiers marching through the field, they say, not again. You guys just broke the treaty. And so the Tusculum army actually sallies out of the city and runs and chases them down and kills a good portion of the army. Because they were completely defenseless at that point.
Yeah, they're happy.
So Tusculum did what Cincinnatus wasn't willing to. And so a bunch of the Aequians end up getting killed anyways.
I'm shocked that Cincinnatus didn't do it when the guy before him didn't do it and it came back. It's like, did you not learn from him doing the whole yoke thing? Like, why did Cincinnatus show mercy?
Because he's better than him. And if he has to, he can beat him. Anyways,
This is my favorite guy so far.
so Cincinnatus, he wins his great victory. He goes back to the city of Rome, enters under triumph.
Just wants to be a part.
Now, while Cincinnatus is back in the city, the quaestors, remember that's just a magistrate position, the quaestors who have been trying to put Volsci on trial this entire time when Cincinnatus is back, they really quick say, let's put him back on trial again, knowing that the tribunes will be afraid to veto him while Cincinnatus is there and while Cincinnatus is dictator. So Cincinnatus, he returns to the city. When he returns to the city, the quaestors decide that they're going to put him on trial. Cincinnatus, he wanted to give up his dictatorship. The Senate asked him to keep it for another day so that they could do this trial while the tribunes would be afraid to veto. Remember that against a dictator, you have no right of appeal. So in the tribune's mind, if they were to veto it, Cincinnatus could say, no, go forward with it, and now there's nothing you can do as dictator.
That's true.
As tribute, right?
Oh, as dictator, there's nothing you can do against him. There's no appeal against the dictator. Yeah. So if the dictator says, no, we're doing it, there's nothing the tribunes can say. Sorry, bad phrasing. So the trial goes forward of Volsci. Again, it wasn't Cincinnatus bringing the trial. It was the quaestors. And Cincinnatus only stayed on as dictator because the Senate asked him to.
Yeah.
When you are appointed dictator, you're appointed dictator for a certain crisis. And so, after 15 days, Cincinnatus resigns from the dictatorship. Now, even though it's the norm for every Roman who becomes a dictator to step down from the dictatorship, almost every single one of them takes the 6 months. When you're appointed dictator, it's for 6 months. Now, you're appointed dictator for 6 months to deal with the crisis. Cincinnatus thought that that was kind of abusing the position. The point of the dictatorship is to deal with the crisis. When the crisis is dealt with, you ought to step down from the dictatorship. So, having all that power, he just gives it up, seeing that the crisis is done with, goes back to his little 4-acre farm north of the Tiber, working away. No revenge, no getting back his wealth from what happened with his son, and just continues living his humble little life. So, that's the end of the war with the Aequi. Any questions before we continue? See what the next slide is, see if we have time to continue. We won't see Cincinnatus again for a while. He'll show up one more time for a sec.
He's cool.
He is cool.
Is he the guy they named Cincinnati after?
Yes, Cincinnati is named after Cincinnatus. Okay, so then fast forwarding to the next year. Again, you have the armies coming and attacking. The consuls need to levy the armies, and they need to go deal with the Aequi, the Sabines, the Volsci, whoever it was. I don't know who it was this year. But once again, the tribunes, they're blocking the levy, stopping the levy from occurring so the tribunes can't get the army, or so the consuls can't get the army. And so the consuls negotiate with the tribunes about what it would take for them to let him just levy the armies, go on their merry way. The tribunes say, if you will let us increase our numbers from 5 to 10, then we will let you levy the armies. The patricians and the consuls say, fine, we will let you go from 5 to 10 tribunes, but we have one extra condition. Stop electing the same tribunes in back-to-back years. Follow this one law. And they say, okay, we will. And so they have the levies, they go fight it, and the new elections come, and this time, there's 10 tribunes elected. 5 of them are identical to the ones that they had before. And so the tribunes refuse to elect new tribunes.
Why do they allow it?
Yeah, why is
Why
it?
is this so
Why do they
insane?
have laws and there's no
Yeah,
consequences
it's like
for
there's
breaking
a
laws?
consequence to the law.
It's like there's no point in the law. There's not an actual consequence to breaking it.
They should be imprisoned or whatever.
It's such a risky thing to block the election of the tribunes from a patrician's position. It's one thing to break up them forcing through an illegal law. It's another thing to try and break up the assembly voting for the tribunes that they want. It's only plebs, and it's largely pleb business, and so you kind of just have to hope that they'll follow their own laws. They don't want to set the precedent of messing with each other's elections, so to speak. So they think that's particularly dangerous. So in those next attacks, after they levied the armies, one of the armies they have to go deal with is another Aequian army. Could have been a Volscian, but I think it was an Aequian army. Once again, attacking the lands around Tusculum. Probably very angry for what Tusculum did to their army that was just let go by the Romans. And so they go, they attack with their camp. An army goes out and deals with that attack. And this time, instead of the plunder being given to the soldiers as it normally is, the Romans, the state finances have been in a bad way ever since the plague had hit. Oh, no, sorry, not since the plague. Since some recent famine. So I think it was in the previous year, there was a famine. This could have been the famine that was a result of way too much rain. I don't remember. One of them that we talked about today was. Anyways, due to the state having to essentially go out and hurry up and purchase food, bring it in so that people can have something to eat and buy it at a reduced rate. The state's out of money. They've got to refill the state funds. And they don't really have a good way to do that except for from like plunders from war. That's the only way to get those funds. And so whatever army is the one who loses out on that plunder, they're always going to be the angry one. Because it's kind of like a disproportionate tax. It's like, we have this big expense, $100 from you, you're okay. $100 from you, you're okay. It's just random people who end up having to pay it, whoever happened to be fighting. So they use the money, refill the state treasury. Plebeians very angry about being cheated out of what they feel like is their rightful plunder. And so what they do is wait until the consuls are out of office, and once again, they're going to bring charges against the consuls. And they're going to go back to this. If you consuls don't agree with this, we're going to start looking for any excuses we can to bring trials against you and get you exiled from the city if we can, at the very least fined. And so they start these trials again. They again start fining a bunch of magistrates. I don't know if it went so far as exiling this time, like it did before. And so, the patricians are in a bad spot once again. They can't sit here and get back to the point where every time one of their magistrates leaves office, the tribunes are bringing capital cases against them, basically accusing them of gross misconduct or whatever, and forcing them to be fined, if not exiled. If not, I think in some cases some of them were killed or something like that, going back far enough. So they can't let it go back to that situation that it was before. That's what they're terrified of. And so they feel like they're going to have to compromise with this law. Now, the Lex Terentilia, remember, that is the law that essentially would put all consular powers in writing, enumerate everything consuls are allowed to do. They're really terrified to do a law like that, which would basically just be restricting the consuls. They feel like that would give the plebs too much power. And so instead, Lex Aequilia, some guy named Aequilia, put forward a new law that he suggested. And it is a law that designates the Aventine Hill for strictly the plebs. So remember, one of the things that ultimately led to them pushing for the Lex Terentilia was the agrarian law. They wanted their own lands. And so this is kind of like, remember what you guys were angry about before and the whole reason that you wanted this? Here you go. Here's some land, actually inside Rome, one of the 7 hills, plebs only. No patricians allowed. You guys get your own hill inside the city. On top of that, tribunes keep pushing, and patricians are really afraid of their magistrates, basically ultimately going to be brought up on all these false trials. The other thing that they do is, rather than this Lex Terentilia law that you guys keep pushing forward, instead, what we will do is we will pass a new law that all the Roman laws have to be written down and displayed in the forum. And so rather than appointing 5 men to write down the laws over the consuls, we will instead appoint 10 men who will set up the laws over the Romans. And so if you want to take away arbitrary powers from the consuls, we've got to get rid of arbitrary laws and have more concrete laws. So this is the new suggestion being pushed for after they already got the Aventine Hill. So that one's already done. This is a following up year. And so the patricians, they say that they will agree to this so long as the 10 men that are appointed are patricians. So fine. You plebs want it that badly. We'll let you have it. You can vote on whoever you want to fill up these positions, but they have to be patricians. Patricians have to be the ones passing the laws. They're in particularly worried about some sort of special laws limiting their consuls. They don't want that to happen. So if it's patricians there, they think that that'll be good. The plebs agree to this so long as no past tribunal laws can be repealed. Remember way back that they were worried about Cincinnatus taking the army outside of Rome and undoing all the tribunal laws. So they don't want any of that to happen. We're still going to have tribunes. There's still going to be 10 of us. We're still going to have the powers we have. The people are still going to have the power they have. No taking back the Aventine Hill. No backsies. And so as long as we have that, then everyone's on the same page. And so this is what they agreed to. They're going to have 10 men appointed who are going to write down the Roman laws. Now, before they can do this, they kind of need to give a sense for what people do when they're in this situation. Because up till now, all the laws had been oral laws. They hadn't really written down a precise code of laws before. And so what they do is they send 3 men over to Athens to study the famous laws of Solon. One of the 7 wise men or 10 wise men of the ancient world, whatever the number was with each of their wise sayings. He's largely the one that put the government in place for Athens' democracy, what led to Athens' democracy. And so Solon was a very famous lawgiver. Understand, the Romans know the Greeks. They know what's going on in the Greek world, roughly. And so Greeks are famous for being intellectuals, but also for having good laws. So they're going to send 3 men, in particular to study these laws, but in general, get familiar with Greek constitutions, Greek ways of setting up systems of government. Get educated on Greek government, essentially. Familiarize yourself with all the Greek laws and Greek constitutions you can. And then when you come back, we'll appoint these 10 men to set up these laws that will then govern Rome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and
That's smart.
remember, these city-states have already gone through a bunch of the transitions that Rome's kind of going through here. It's very common that you have these situations, like when Solon wrote the laws in Athens, it's a very similar situation. You had first a tyrant ruling in Athens. The aristocracy overthrew the tyrant, kind of like the patricians overthrowing Tarquin. And then, over time, the aristocrats in Athens had accumulated more and more of the wealth, and more of the land belonged to them. And so Solon was appointed as a lawgiver in Athens to deal with this situation and set up laws that could both work for the wealthy elites as well as the poor masses, redistribute things to make a good city-state that could function and go forward in time. So that's what he was famous for, and that's kind of the situation Rome's currently in. So good choice of someone to go to try and figure out how to move forward so that they don't just go on this cycle of killing each other, appointing tyrants, and then tyrants, elites.
I didn't even know they were in contact with Greece.
Remember, Cumae was already one of the cities, Cumae, which is a Greek city, all the way back to King Tarquin. That's the last place he ended up, was Cumae. And during one of their famines, when they were trying to get food from Sicily, which is going to be dominated by the Greeks, it was Cumae that stopped them from getting some of their food. But yeah, they're connected with the Greek world. Magna Graecia, that's what they call southern Italy right now. Magna Graecia, the part of Italy where the Greeks are.
Isn't most of their religion based off of Greek mythology as well? At this point, or is it?
No. As time goes on, they piggyback more and more on the Greeks. So they start attributing the same things to both people.
How about the Greeks and the Romans got along?
I wouldn't say that they got along. I would say that the Romans said, I like that, I'll take that, thank you.
Well, compared to their other allies, the people around them, I imagine they did get along.
We'll get to the Pyrrhic Wars. Hopefully. Okay, sorry, a little bit past time. Any other questions you want recorded? That's a good ending point. Getting ready for the December.
The what?
The 10 elected officials who are going